Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. You know what time that is. It's the latest edition of Bold Leaders in Learning. I'm your host, Brandon Busteed, Chief Partnership Officer and Global Head of Learn Work Innovation at Kaplan. And I'm excited today to have one of my colleagues with me, Qudus Lawal, who is our Director of Corporate Strategy at Kaplan. And importantly, also many years before that, was one of the first Kaplan Education Foundation scholars, and has come full circle from being a Kaplan Education Foundation scholar off to college and a number of other pursuits, and now officially working at Kaplan in an executive role. And the reason why I wanted to have Qudus on today was to talk about his story through the lens of what I believe most of us in the education world are always motivated by, right? Which is the success stories of those that we try to serve and support. And so there's a whole incredible set of insights from Qudus's journey, and I thought it would be terrific to share. So Qudus, thanks for joining us today. Maybe just tell folks a little bit more about you and your background and your role at Kaplan, and then we'll go from there to talk about the Education Foundation and the big journey that you've been on.
Yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks, Brandon. As I said, my name is Qudus Lawal. I currently am the Director of Corporate Development at Kaplan, which is, I started 5 months ago now, so I'm still fresh, learning. But before then, I was in consulting, helping tech companies get funding from the US government. And before then, I was at Stanford getting my degree in chemical engineering. Originally from Nigeria, and I came to the US about 13 years ago now, which feels like a long time ago, like a lifetime ago. And then did community college in the Bronx, and then got the foundation scholarship, and then transferred to Stanford to finish my undergrad and continued on for my master's. And so that's the very short overview of the story. I'm sure, as Brandon asks more questions, I will try to answer some of those questions.
Yeah, that is the short, succinct version of it, Qudus, but obviously we want to unpack that a little bit. It starts with, I think you said you were 17 when you left Nigeria to come to the United States, but one of the big drivers of that were your parents and your dad in particular, and it was a big dream of his to make sure his kids got to go to college, and specifically in the U.S. Just tell us a little bit more about where that came from and his motivation and support for you.
Yeah. So growing up in Nigeria, and my anytime I talk to my dad and my mom, they would always tell me, hey, the plan has always been after high school we're going to come to the US for college, and they've always instilled in me the power of education, to saying, hey, if you can give your education your best and you come to the US, you're gonna be great. You're gonna be successful. So I think that mantra from them was always key. And my older brothers were always helping me out throughout high school in Nigeria. And then after I finished high school. So the funny thing is actually in high school in Nigeria, we didn't actually learn computer skills. Mm-hmm. I didn't learn computer skills. So after I finished high school, I took 6 months to learn how to use PowerPoint, how to use Microsoft Word, how to type on the computer and stuff like that. Then before coming out to the US, and when I came, my parents didn't really understand the educational system in the United States. So the trajectory that everybody did, including my older brothers, was we take our GED, and we start at community college, and that was what I did, and at the time, it was always start community college. My dad advised me to work part-time and go to school part-time to adjust. And I think that actually really helped me with the transition. But so I was, going to school part-time, working part-time, and talking about just how difficult it is to navigate the educational system, right? At the time, I think I didn't qualify for financial aid at the time, even though my parents weren't making a lot of money. But due to maybe the tax due, my parents filed the taxes or something, I didn't qualify. So I had to pay out of pocket, and during that journey, my older brother actually introduced me to this leadership program in my community college. And I was part of that program, like, learning how to, like, present myself and do volunteerism. Actually, like, I think my first summer in the US, I met the then governor of New York, and met the Mayor Bloomberg at the time, at the 9/11 kind of like, memorial event. And I think during all that time, the leadership of that program, Jason Lipfield, like the director of that program, told me about the Kaplan Educational Foundation, and it's like, you should apply. And I didn't know much about the program. I just like, oh yeah, for sure, like, I'm gonna give it a shot. And because part of the requirement for the foundation was that the student applying has to qualify for financial aid. And at the time, I didn't qualify for financial aid, even though I do need financial aid. Jason had to write a letter to the director of Kaplan to say, hey, this guy, this is his story. He does need the financial assistance and all those things. And I was very fortunate that, like, and I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the foundation. Just like I think it's like it's not like a checkbox. They like really, like, try to, like, address the scholar, like, on an individual level. And I was very fortunate to get accepted to the foundation scholarship. And it's since then it's been a lot of, like, after I joined the foundation and started learning how to, like, I think the biggest thing that, like, I really learned from that experience was how to tell my story, how to see that, like, because there were many parts of my past that I actually, like, personally, like, I think feel insecure about or feel ashamed of, because I'm like, I'm like, look at my GED, or like I didn't not use a computer until I was 18. There's all these insecurities that I had, but I think what the foundation really helped me to see was the power in that, like the strength that it takes, the perseverance it took to, like, overcome all those obstacles to be here. And that's, and that really, like, really shine through in my applications. And I was over the moon when I got into Stanford, because I didn't expect to get in. And I remember I was at Battery Park in New York City, and I looked at the email from, like, a BlackBerry at the time, and I was running up and down, like, I was like, no way. So
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. So
yeah. Some of these parts of this, right, just kind of go back, right? You had finished high school in Nigeria, but because your parents didn't have a good understanding of, like, how to transfer or recognize or whatever, you still had to go take the GED. Yeah. Right. Your point about you hadn't touched a computer or done anything, from a, basic, kind of computer perspective until you're 18. Like, you finished high school. On top of it, you still had to do the GED. You guys should have, from every, perspective, qualified for financial aid, but because of a lack of understanding of the, the system and, different filings and forms and all that kind of stuff, right? That was a barrier. Yeah. And then I'm just struck by the fact that, like, so great, you got yourself through those hurdles into community college. And then it was something kind of, I'll call it random, right? Somebody there, interacting with you personally and saying, Qudus, have you heard about this thing called the Kaplan Education Foundation? That could have been any, foundation or scholarship for that matter, right? Like, wasn't like, you found it on your own necessarily. It was somebody who said, hey, you should be aware. Yeah. And then, you didn't technically qualify for that because it was the same financial aid that would have qualified you for financial aid at the college, right? But there was at least the ability to see around the corner and determine that, yeah, this is somebody who does have, real need for support. So, like, I just think that any one of those could have been a hurdle, a barrier that kept you from doing this. Right now, you add like 6 or 7 to the list, and you wonder how people get through this, into and through this thing we call college. But yeah, I want to talk about the foundation piece, right? Because it specifically focuses on helping highly talented community college students transfer into really top tier institutions, right? And so you went from one of the CUNY schools into Stanford, right? One of the world's top ranked universities. And you had told me that you had heard of some of the names of US universities, like you had heard of Harvard, but you also mentioned that you never heard of Stanford before, which, like, to a lot of people in the United States, be like, are you crazy? But like, and you told me a story about your dad too that I'd love you to share, that he hadn't heard much about it either. So
no, yeah, so that's actually, like, I before Kaplan I never heard of Stanford. And so after I got, after I started doing the research and I got in, and I told my parents, hey dad, hey mom, I got into Stanford. And they're like, oh, that's awesome, that's great. Where's Stanford? I was like, oh, it's in California. I'm like, oh, that's kind of far away, I had gone to another school in New York, and my mom was like, hey, go to this school in New York, it's close. But I'm like, mom, it's Stanford, it's Stanford. And my dad, who was a cab driver at the time, like he drove around like NYU, Columbia, picked up professors and academics in that area, and would have conversations with them and say, hey, my son got accepted to Stanford. What do you guys think? And they would tell him, like, that's awesome, that's great. So I remember my dad coming home that day saying, Qudus, you're going to Stanford, that's awesome. I'm like, yes, dad, yes, that's awesome. So that's one of my I think that's one of my really special memories. And I remember, like, even like, getting to Stanford and presenting the letter of acceptance to my parents, and how, like, pretty much my full tuition was covered and living expenses was covered and everything else. And my dad, like, that was one of the first times I saw him cry. It was like, wow, like, because they couldn't make that available to me, and I would have been of shame if I had gotten accepted and didn't have the means to, like, cover the cost. So yeah, so it's definitely one of a very special moment for me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it certainly sounds like for your dad and mom as well, right? And they were excited that you got into Stanford. Then when they realized, what a big deal that was, right? It had additional special meaning. And
exactly.
So there's so much of this that's like, I mean, it must have felt like a catapult for you, right? Like, first you come from Nigeria to the United States, right? You within, at the age of 18, you're like first exposure to computers. Then you're immediately in, a different country. You're in community college. A few years later, you've been accepted to Stanford. Now, you're at one of the world's top universities. You're in the middle of Silicon Valley, right? Like, tell me, like, how did you adjust to all this? Like, what were the feelings you had? What were the challenges? And then would love to, talk a little bit later about the people and things that really helped you succeed through all that. So, but I just want to know, like, how does it feel to go through that kind of transition? I mean, it just couldn't have been easy.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah. It's funny that you asked that, because two Kaplan scholars got into Stanford this year. So I was talking to both of them this week, actually, and I was reminiscing about that experience. And I'd come from a fairly small town in Nigeria, just before I turned 18, learned to use a computer, like, about a year before then, and then moved to the in the Bronx, and then going from, like, the inner cities in the Bronx to, like, this manicured lawns of Stanford, all within, like, and this happened all between, like, over, like, a 3-year period, was challenging. I think there was a level of insecurity that I felt, feeling of like, this was a fluke, I wasn't good enough. Like, how did I, like, there was a lot of, like, self-doubt that I had inside. And with that self-doubt came, like, this desire to, like, prove myself, to, like, show people, like, yo, like, I got this, I can do this. And it was really hard. It was really tough. And I think there was also, like, a loneliness that comes with that too, because, like, now I'm so far away from my family, and, like, I'm like, the reality that I was living in was something that my dad, my mom, and parts of my family couldn't really understand. And and I'm going to this great institution where, like, my first day of classes, people are saying that, like, they've competed in the Olympics, or, like, started a company, a non-profit, and things like that. I'm like, what am I doing here? And so there was just a lot of, like, inner turmoil that I had to, like, wrestle through. And I think just as it was exciting, it was also very daunting at the same time. And that adjustment was challenging. Nancy Sanchez, who is the director of the foundation, I remember a lot of conversations with her, just and her reminding me that you got this. And my mom, I want to give a shout out to my mom. She almost always knows when I'm going through a tough time, because she just calls me randomly, just hey, how's it going? And I'm like, Mom, I was just I just finished crying about the midterm that I'm feeling anxious about, and she calls. So it's just really cool to see so I feel like that support.
Yeah, because you had said, used the term, you felt like a little imposter syndrome, right? Like, am I good enough, right? And then that was combined with oh my gosh, I have this opportunity, now I have to save the world, right? And so there was this big burden. And so the one of the guests that I had on Bold Leaders in Learning last year was Jennifer Morton, who wrote the book Moving Up Without Losing Your Way. And she talks about first gen students, right, who end up succeeding through college, and particularly through elite colleges and universities. And not only in some cases, like for her, she was from Peru. She ended up coming to the United States, so she was physically far away from her family, but she had also been catapulted into a totally different socioeconomic class, a different stratosphere, right? So she felt that distance as well. And, it becomes lonely. I mean, these were, several of the words you use. So, you also were blessed in many ways with lots of support, right? Not just through the Kaplan Education Foundation, but people at Stanford. And I would love to have you talk about some of the really critical people and moments that kind of help you along, because you even got to study abroad when you were at Stanford, right? So it sounds like you made the most of it, but I would love to just hear some of your comments about the people and the programs and the support systems that were really invaluable to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the imposter syndrome was very real, definitely. And I think that was one of the things that I really appreciate about my experience at Stanford is the level of support that there is. I think first, even just to all my Stanford students out there, you guys are amazing. I think I feel very fortunate, because the Stanford student community that I experienced were very just supportive and welcoming, and just and I think there were specific moments, right, that really helped shaped and helped build my confidence, reaching out to a professor asking to do research at a lab, and she's saying, yes, come sit down in my lab meetings and see if this is something that you're interested in. I was able to I was within my first year, I was able to join a lab and started doing research, and I was able to get published before I graduated with my undergrad, which is incredible.
That's awesome.
So that's one. And I think there was a lot of support for even just office hours, TAs, professors were very accessible. So there was that. And I think there was also a very rich, I think, undergraduate life. And I think different clubs on campus that I was a part of that really helped kind of shape and help me build a community. But I think one particular class, I think I was telling you about this earlier, there was a class that I took because after I got into Stanford, I felt like I had to go and do something incredible. I was I gotta go get a PhD and then discover the next best thing. And I took this class called Finding Your Own Story that helped students navigate how they define success in terms of are you going to define success by what people expect, what you think people expect of you, or what inside of you as very valuable and important to you. And because I had gone into Stanford, I was doing this research, I was in chemical engineering, I cared a lot about the environment. I was okay, I gotta go get a PhD, because that's the only way that I can have an impact. And then taking that class and then taking a class at the GSB, that's the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where I learned about how business and technology and policy have to play hand in hand to for real impact to really happen. It's oh, actually no, I don't have to get a PhD. Actually I do want to I've gotten some technical skills. I want to expand into understanding more how policy works and understanding how business works, right? And being able to have that was really powerful. And And Stanford had just, like you mentioned the study abroad, being able to study abroad and go to, I was able to like go to Germany. And while I was in Germany, traveled around Europe, which was like experiences that like, I would never had imagined in my wildest dream, just like a little kid coming from in Nigeria, like, that was just not, it wasn't even in the realm of fantasy for me, and but to like be in those spaces and engage at that level and succeed at that level was very like inspiring for me and gave me a lot of confidence to know like, oh wow, like I can do this, I got this, and Stanford, support was very supportive, even like studying abroad. The study abroad program in Berlin is attached to like an internship, like if you're interested. So I was able to like go back in the summer for an internship at a German company.
Wow.
And that was, another like, amazing experience. So, but there's just like a lot of like little moments like that really, one, like increase my confidence, and it almost like demystifies those spaces for me. Because I think like you can imagine like doing something and it's like, oh, like that's like way out there. But then you are experiencing those, you living those experiences out, and you realize that, wow, I have what it takes. Like I can succeed here, and I belong here. And I think there's this. I'm just remembering different things now. Like there's like Stanford has this event called Faces of Stanford, in which they invite students to tell their story. And I applied to like tell my story, and I was privileged to like actually share my story with like incoming freshmen, like like almost like 2,000 people, just like, hey, this is my story. And that was a really like, and I think all of this thing, like me sharing my story, like I really believe like, really truly started with the foundation, where they, like, I think very early on, they instilled in me this, like, your story is unique and your story is powerful, and your story is, your story contributes to the environment that you live in. And sharing that story and even being here right now and talking to you about this is like personally very rewarding for me, because it helps me remember like how far I've come, right? But then also like think of like how much more there is to go, but also like realizing like, I think I was telling you this, that like back in Nigeria, they were like, I wasn't the smartest kid. I was pretty smart in Nigeria, right? But I wasn't the smartest kid. I wasn't the most hardworking kid, But if I can make it this far, and all I needed was opportunities and people, support system along the way to get to where I'm at, where I am. Like how many smart, talented people in Nigeria, and just even not just Nigeria, but like even in the United States, like in that could have make it as far. So I think that also inspires me a lot. Even that's part of why I chose to work at Kaplan, because I really believe in, like, I really truly believe that education is the way to like really like open opportunities. And so I know I just wanted a little bit of a rant there, but that's that's stuff that is kind of like ruminating in my head at the moment.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of amazing points and gems in that, Qudus. I mean, just your point about reflecting on, I asked you, I was like, well, when did you know you were really smart and talented, right? Like, did it take Stanford to have you realize that? And that was when we talked a little bit about going back to your small town in Nigeria, where you were like, honestly, I don't think I was even the smartest person there. There were other kids in my class who were just as smart, or smarter, or worked harder, and and a lot of them, the difference is they didn't have the opportunities. They didn't have a parent that said, like, we're going to make this happen, and this is something, because every, like we've talked about, every step along the way there, you could have been derailed in that process, right? And I loved your other point too about kind of demystifying things, right? Like the travel abroad experience, right? Like demystifies, foreign countries and different cultures, and having an internship working for a company demystifies that world of work and what really happens there. And so that's an interesting way to kind of think about those opportunities, is demystifying it. But clearly at every level, right, there was some level of, I don't feel like I belong, maybe I'm not good enough, right? And each level you found a way to kind of power through that and prove that you do, right? But there was this consistent theme that I think is interesting. You talked about how when you were intensely involved with the Kaplan Education Foundation, it was a lot about how to tell your story, how to reflect on the power of your story, right? You talked about this class at Stanford that had a big impact on you. And then some of these opportunities you've had to tell your story or define it. Like that's a real key takeaway that I think, we in the education world should think about how we embed more of that in what we do. And I know there's a lot of great programs and, classes and others that do that. I always reflect on the hardest assignment I ever had in college, which was to write a paper on my purpose in life. And I mean, it was a similar, but like that was the hardest assignment I had. And even worse, it was only 5 pages. So like you had to, it wasn't 20. I could have written 20 on that, but 5 was really hard. And so that, there's something important in that I think, we can all reflect on. But as you go back now, you've, thinking back on these things, I know you're still in touch with a lot of the current students in the Kaplan Education Foundation program. That, the alumni student connection seems to be a big part of that. Just tell me more about that. Like, were you connected with alumni when you were in it? And how many students are you connecting with that are in the program now currently?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the foundation is the support that you get from the alumni. It's really, really special. I remembered after I got accepted, people like Kylie, people like Bolaji, and previous cohorts just saying yo, feel free to reach out anytime if you need anything, no questions asked. And when I was applying to Stanford, there was a Kaplan scholar who was at Stanford at the time who was on her way out. And she connected me with a chemical engineering student at Stanford who gave me some input and some thoughts. And she really helped me a lot. Her name is Ebony. And so that's really just it's really like a family, and it's great. And I've been really lucky to stay connected to some of them. In my previous job, while I was in consulting, and I would fly to DC for work every now and then, I would meet up with an alum. His name is Hamisu, who works in DC now. And I think it is because we see how far we've come, and we see how we weren't able to get there without the support of those around us. And even now, I am really excited that 2 Kaplan scholars are going to be coming to Stanford next year. I'm hey, let's plan for dinner every month, every week if possible, but I know you guys are going to be busy, let's, and I think also because there are only a very few people that I think understands how difficult that transition is from a community college,
right,
to some of the best institutions in the world. Only very few people understand that. And to be sitting across someone who gets the imposter syndrome, the challenges, the struggle, there's something that feels very calming about that. There's something that feels very, I think builds my own confidence about that. And I personally want to offer that to anyone who goes through the program. And there's different I think Kaplan Foundation really try to connect the alumni with the current scholars without on a one-on-one mentorship. Before these two young gentlemen, I was trying to I talked to a scholar who ended up going to University of Rochester. I would talk to her every couple of weeks just to, how's it going? Are you setting your schedules? Are you on top of your PSETs? And how are you dealing with yourself emotionally? And are you taking breaks? Because I was insecurities, all those things are so important to explore and have conversations about. And that's, I think I want to offer that out to to people as they go through the program. Yeah.
You said something. I mean, this obviously the alumni student connection has been such a valuable part of it. But your point about how there are so few people that actually understand what it's like to transfer from a community college into an elite university. That shouldn't be the case. I mean, it is, right? And elite universities right now are being criticized for a number of things. One, leaning too heavily on legacy admissions, right? Letting, admitting children of alumni and, development, prospects, right, who have the ability to give money. But one of the things they don't do a great job of is accepting transfer students from other universities, let alone from community colleges. And I would just love to see a elite university-wide initiative, right? Whether that's across the Ivy League or Ivy League Plus or others, where they commit to larger percentages of community college transfer enrollments, because through the lens of the experiences you've had and all the other colleagues in the Kaplan Education Foundation, right? They are more successful than the average students enrolling in the institutions, right? And their stories are incredible. And this is a group of students that are 100% diverse in terms of where they come from and who they are. And as these universities struggle to improve their diversity pipeline, and as the companies hiring these graduates do, it just seems to me like there's a huge opportunity there. So, first of all, thanks for being an incredible inspiration for everybody, being a great example of what, the ultimate outcome of an education really can be and looks like. And certainly, I think you've been an inspiration to yourself as well, because a lot of this is you, motivating yourself through this. But thanks for being willing to share the story. And it's been a delight having you on the show today, Qudus. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Brandon. It's a good pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll look forward to catching you all again next week, and hope you have a terrific Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you in a week.